Good evening, everyone. Glad you all could join us. I started it just a few seconds early because I know we have a lot to cover. So just a little bit, we are recording, so if for privacy, you can keep your video off. But any kind of questions, you can put them in the chat box. And I want tonight, we are dealing with how to utilize benefits this month. We're talking about benefits, understanding and utilizing benefits. We've talked about Medicare, Medicaid this month, but we're ending the month. Last week was part one of Social Security, navigating Social Security. This week we're kind of looking at the work incentives, but it's also you can ask whatever questions, whether it's, for last week's discussion on navigating or this week. We did put a link. We'll put a link in the chat box, or make sure you have the link to get to the presentation, but I'll be sharing my screen. So in the meantime, while people are still signing in, I'm going to be pulling up the presentation, and we have Debi Schwartz here. Due to high winds in the Ohio area, as many of you know, she is calling via phone tonight. So she is on her phone. She'll be talking, and I'll be progressing this, doing the slides for her. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Debi, while I pull up your presentation.
Okay, thank you, Patty. Yes, thank you for bearing with me today. We lost power at noon. It was supposed to be back on hours ago, and it still isn't. So I'm out of my car charging my phone while I'm handling this on my phone.
And then I promised you a question then, so whenever you're ready, let me know.
I'm ready for the question. Go ahead, and then we'll kick off.
Okay. So the first question for this evening is, what happens if someone on SSDI and wants to try to work more than part-time? Besides not getting SSDI anymore, what happens to their Medicaid waiver, which is their transportation and some HPC? Will they be required to pay back what they have received from SSDI?
Well, we will go. That's unpacking a whole lot there. If they're receiving SSDI benefits and they make over the $1,550, some of the things that they look at is, in evaluating that threshold, the $1,550. And we'll get into that a little bit more later in the presentation. Is, do they have other things that can be taken into account to bring those earnings below? But if the earnings are still above the 1,550, which means they would not be due a cash benefit, their Medicaid could continue if they're already on a waiver, which is what usually I think would cover the transportation and home-based services. The amount that they can earn without a patient liability for that is, and see, now this is the disadvantage of not being in my office, but 3 times $943. So you could make that much money and it's not going to impact that waiver. Above that, if you have any earnings above that, there is a possibility that you could owe the Medicaid waiver dollar for dollar anything you make over that in order to maintain the waiver. So it's very unlikely that you're going to lose the waiver. Also, if you're concerned about losing the waiver because you're going to be making more than that consistently, there is another program which we'll get to later in my presentation called MVIWD Medicaid buy-in for workers with disability. And that is a premium-based form of Medicaid. And with that premium-based form of Medicaid, the premium is always going to be lower than the patient liability. And their qualifications are that you have a disability and you have a job. So you would qualify, and that would be another way of maintaining the Medicaid. So it may be that all you end up losing is the the only thing you end up losing is the SSDI cash benefit.
Okay, Debbie, I'm
Does that
pulling up.
answer that question?
Yeah, Cindy, if you need, does that answer your question, or just let us know if you need to know if you need to know a little bit more about that. You
Okay, if
said
we could
which
go
slide?
uh, a few before that, slide number 3, the one that
Slide
says
3.
types of benefits.
There you go.
There we go.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm just going to kind of do a very quick, maybe 5-minute brief overview of what we covered, the highlights of last week. So when I'm talking about SSDI benefits or SSI benefits, that you're aware of which benefit is which. And so if you were not here last week, or if you were here last week and you want a little bit of a refresher or reminder, the types of benefits we're talking about: SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance. As I've stated before, if you're a dependent child receiving benefits on a parent's record because they're receiving benefits, or they're a survivor, you're certainly eligible to receive that benefit up to age 18, up to age 19 if you're still in high school. However, there is also a benefit for those that are over 18 that became fully disabled prior to age 22, and that is the disabled adult child benefit. And these will, the young adults or your children who were receiving disabled adult child benefits on the parent record will have the same work incentive rules that any other SSDI beneficiary has advantage of. So if you've worked and paid into Social Security and now you're getting SSDI benefits, the disabled adult child has that same benefit. So when I go over those two work incentives, it's the same type of work incentive. SSI stands for Supplemental Security Income. That is a program based on financial need. Because of that, is a money thing. And so there's not as much you can work and earn and still draw that full SSI check, with some exceptions, including students, and we'll get there when we get there. But so if your young adult or if your child is receiving SSI benefits, we're going to want to address that on the SSI side. There are some that are receiving both Social Security Disability and SSI. Either they're receiving some childhood disability benefit, but that's not as much as 943, so they get a little extra on the SSI to supplement it up to that 943. Or they've worked and paid into Social Security, maybe a part-time job through high school or a work-study program when they've been doing transition, or they've just been working a year or so since they got out of school, but they've not paid in enough to earn a high amount. It's an insurance policy, basically. So the more you pay in, the higher your benefit amount. So the SSI can supplement it. So it's very possible that you could have individuals that are receiving benefits from both Social Security or the SSDI and the Supplemental Security Income or the SSI. Each benefit and how the work incentives relate to them are handled separately, and we'll go over that as we go through this. Okay, so let's get to the work incentive. So now we'll go to slide 11. Thank you. So I'm going to quickly run through. Oh, this is an old version. Let me give you the new dollar amounts. And I'm sorry, I had a handout that went along with this for the SSDI. However, I have not had power all day, so I wasn't able to get that out to Patty. The 9-month trial work period on SSDI, the first 9 months you work after you receive Social Security disability benefits, whether it be on your own work record or as a disabled adult child, you can work and make as much money as you want for up to 9 months while you test your ability to work. Now, these are last year's amounts. This year, it is $1,110. I'm not sure why that didn't stay, but if your son or daughter is only making a couple $100 a week, they may not even hit that $1,110 threshold. So it would be not until they've made 9 months of wages above that they've used that 9-month trial work period. After that, it's a 36-month extended period of eligibility. Again, that amount is wrong. I'm not sure why it didn't hold the new amounts, but the new amount is 1,500. Oh, I see. Because I put the 550 and I missed taking the 3 out. It's $1,550 a month, and I apologize for that. I'll get that corrected out to you. Thank you.
I think it will let me update as I go here.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
But yeah, the other's 1,050. Well, anyway, so anyway, so we had that 1,550 a month. So after you used up your 9-month trial work period, as long as your wages are below $1,550 a month, you get to keep your benefit regardless. Now, extended Medicare, what does that mean? That means that even if you find a great job and you are making an outstanding amount of money, you go through your 9-month trial work period, you're into that 36-month period and you're making way over the $1,550 a month, you can continue your Medicare for up to 93 months after the 9-month trial work period. So maybe you've been able to find a really great job, but the insurance is kind of shaky or iffy. You can decide to keep the Medicare. And oftentimes if you're on a waiver, the waiver will pay that Medicare premium because they would prefer that you keep it. Expedited reinstatement, I've got it listed here. That just means that if your cash benefit, if your wages are so high that you're making over that $1,550, after that 36-month period, if your wages are still higher than that, your cash benefit would end, even if your Medicare continued. But if within a 5-year period, your benefit, you stop working and making that $1,500, more than $1,550, you can get your benefits back for up to 6 months while they make a new medical decision under a policy called expedited reinstatement. They'll reinstate your check right away, your cash check right away. If you had decided to cancel your Medicare, you could pick your Medicare back up right away, and they'll pay that benefit for up to 6 months while they update the medical decision. So it's a really great safety net to say, hey, they're doing really great. They're working at Amazon, making $22 an hour full time. We love it. They're going to keep it up. But if something happens, we can always go back and they can reinstate the benefit. Now, on the SSI side, because SSI is a program based on financial need, it's not quite as lucrative. There is a $20 general exclusion. That means the first $20 you have in wages of any kind will not be counted from the wages, and the first $65 of wages are excluded, and 1/2 of the balance is excluded. So a really quick example is that if you made $185 and you had no other income, minus 20, minus 65, would bring you down to 100. You divide it by 2, it means you would lose half of that $100 or $50 at the SSI. You still have more money in the long run, but it's not as lucrative as the other SSDI side. One thing that is good though is you'll see the policy is says 1619B Medicaid. That is a policy that says that if you work and make so much money that your SSI cash benefit goes to 0, you will still be able to keep your Medicaid up to, this year is like close to $42,000 a year because of that policy. So the policy is to encourage you as a work incentive to make as much money as you want. And even if minus 20, minus 65 divided by 2 ultimately brings your SSI cash benefit down to 0, you're still eligible for your Medicaid, which is very important. An expedited reinstatement is available for SSI as well. Technically, as long as you keep updating SSI and you keep the SSI case open, which you would want to do to keep the Medicaid active and open, you wouldn't need the SSI expedited reinstatement. Instead, you would just simply notify Social Security that the benefits, the wages stopped, and they would raise the benefits back up and start them back up right away. Any questions on that before we go forward?
I don't see any questions yet.
Okay. Let's go to the next slide for allowances made for special situations. Now, for both Social Security and SSI, the first one is impairment related work expense. This applies to both programs. This means that if you have any out-of-pocket expense related to the condition that is required for you to pay in order to keep that job, you can have that deducted from your work. So from the SSDI side, it would be important if you were making over $1,550, but say you had a physical therapist that wasn't covered by Medicaid or your health insurance, or you had co-payments on medications, or you had special transportation. You had to pay, because of the disability, you had to pay an Uber or a taxi or some sort of special transportation in order to get to and from work. Those could be deducted off of those wages to see if it brings you below the $1,550. On the SSI side, it becomes part of that math problem. So it's the minus the $20, minus the $65, and then minus whatever you paid out of pocket before they divide by 2 and subtract off of the SSI check. So you would get to keep more of your money. Now, if it's being paid for by the waiver or an organization or an agency like OOD, then that's not gonna count. It would be what you would be paying for out of your own pocket. Subsidized work and special conditions. These two are SSDI work incentives. So either you've worked and paid in on your own, or your child is receiving the childhood disability benefit. So it does not apply to the SSI. But if you're making over that $1,550, but your employer is being very benevolent and allows you to work at a slower pace or take extra time for breaks or take extra breaks, or you have a job coach that has to come on board and work with you, or the boss, the supervisor has to remind you or spend extra time with you, and they're okay with that because they want, they want you to be there, and they want you as an employee, but they're providing this special accommodation. If Social Security can ascertain from them what the value of that accommodation is, it can be subtracted off of those gross wages if they're above 1,550 to see if they can bring them below 1,550. So a lot of times you may have somebody who's making 16, 17, $1,800 a month, but they bring in 20% fewer carts at Walmart than an unimpaired person would do. If they could verify through the employer that you were bringing in 20% less, or that part of your job would be to back up stocking shelves or back up cashier, but that's not a job that you have the capacity to do, but they're paying you the same rate as somebody who would have that as a backup. Maybe they would take 20% off your wages. So if you were making $1,800, but you had 20% subsidy or special condition or help, then that would take $360 off and bring you below the 1,550. And that way you would be able to maintain that and show that you're over the SSDI check. The biggest frustration is getting employers to fill out the form to certify it. Sometimes we can get a job coach or a job developer or somebody from Developmental Disability Board, like the SSA, to fill that out in conjunction with the employer. But some employers, I talked to a parent the other day, that the employer absolutely refuses to sign anything. So there would need to be documentation in order to take advantage of that. But it would be a good way to keep that check, even if you were otherwise over the 1,550. Next slide is a real fast one because it just says special work incentives. It leads me into some of the special work incentives. So the first one is special provisions for the blind. For the SSDI side, I keep talking about this $1,550 limit. $1,550 a month is the SGA rate, the substantial gainful activity rate. For those who are stat blind or considered legally blind, it's $2,590. So you can make more money and keep your check. So they had a great lobbyist back a long time ago, and they were able to lobby to have a higher SGA rate. So if, not that you wish that blindness on your child, but if that is a condition that they have, then they would be able to earn more money without risking losing their Social Security disability check. There are, on the SSI side, the math formula is different. And it can make a huge difference. So it's the -20 minus 65 divided by 2 minus anything that would be considered a regular impairment related work expense, like we've already talked about, your transportation, out-of-pocket medical expenses and things like that. But also it includes state, federal, local income tax, your Social Security taxes, union dues, a pension plan that you're forced to pay into, your meals that you buy while you're working. So if you're working an 8-hour day and you spend $8 on your lunch, keep that receipt. So it's the whatever you have, those wages -20 minus 65 divide by 2, then minus those federal taxes, minus those state taxes, minus that transportation, minus that lunch you had at work. So you get to keep a significantly larger portion of your SSI check than you would if you were not stat blind. Okay, next page. My favorite work incentive, the student earned income exclusion. This is only available on the SSI side. So this is a case where the SSI side is better than the SSDI side when it comes to students. Back before this law was passed in 2000, along with the Ticket to Work legislation, 2001, the limit for the student earned income exclusion was $400 a month up to $1,620 a year. And that was for those old job training programs that were like 100 a week for the 16 weeks you had during the summer months, for disadvantaged, they called it for disadvantaged youth. And it was a way that they could have those earnings, make a little money in the summer, and not have it affect the SSI check. But then in the fall, they would go to school. Maybe they were in their last year or two of school and they were doing transition work. And then they get this little part-time job. Well, minus 20, minus 65 divided by 2, the SSI check went down. And even though they were money ahead in the long run, a lot of parents would have their child stop working. And so the student learned early work is bad. So this work incentive was boosted in order to give an incentive to students to try working while they were still a student and to understand that work is good. I know back when my son, who's now 33, when he was still in high school, and he had an opportunity through we had a friend who was trying to make a go of it as a restaurant, and he wasn't making enough money to hire somebody else, but without that person there, he wasn't going to be able to maybe keep the restaurant open. And so he was hosting a big event, a Christmas party for a group. And he asked me if I would come and wait tables, which is silly because I swore when I was in college I would never do that again. But you do what you got to do to help. And I told Andrew, asked if Andrew could come and help him clear plates, because he knew that Andrew sometimes would get bored when we'd be sitting at the restaurant, and Andrew would clear plates just because it was better than sitting there. He had ants in his pants. So I wasn't sure whether or not Tony would be able to pay him anything. So I said, sure. And I told Andrew that I would pay him half of whatever I got in tips for the night. So we worked the longest 2 or 3 hours of my life. And when we got out to the car, I gave him half of what I had made in tips. And I had done pretty good. So I gave him like $40. Well, he peels out like another $30 or $40. And I says, well, what's that? He goes, oh, Tony paid me. This is really cool. On our way home, he called no less than like 7 or 8 friends to tell him how cool it was that just for doing a little bit of stupid work, he got this much money. He was so excited. And it really hit home that even at a young age, even being on the autism spectrum, he still understood that work equaled money, and we let him spend it on whatever he wanted. Eventually, we've now gotten to where he understands he has to save. But at that moment, it was more important for me to link that work is good and I want to do it. So now the student earned income exclusion says that for students up to age 22, they can earn up to $2,290 per month, up to $9,230 a year, and still draw that full SSI check. So it's a perfect excuse to defer deployment at age 22 and have them do other work with maybe within the vocational school, Project Life or Project Search, whatever's available, have a part-time job in the school during school months. And then in between the school years, as long as they're still going to return in the fall, they can make even more money and keep it. Now, on my website is under free forms, it says example of a student earned income exclusion. It's a little old. I haven't updated in the last couple of years, but the dollar amounts ring true. You just have to fill in the new amounts. But it shows you how you can literally go from an IEP meeting in May, work 32 hours during the summer, part-time in the winter, and maybe never lose a dime of SSI or only lose a little bit of SSI. So I love this work incentive because it really does allow that student to maybe have an opportunity to try out 2 or 3 different job tasks while they're in school and have that safety net, so that by the time they transition into adulthood and out of school, they'll know better. Next. Thank you. Section VR section 301, I just want to mention this briefly. Some of your students, based on your income, may be receiving SSI under the age of 18. The criteria for disability benefits prior to age 18 are easier than the rules are easier as far as approving somebody for disability than it is for somebody who is over 18. So it may be when they contact you at age 18 to do what they call an age 18 medical review, they may determine that your disability does not meet the criteria to continue that disability on as an adult. Doesn't happen often, but it does happen periodically. Now, while I encourage parents to appeal that decision and take it to an administrative law judge if they have to, and there are ways, if you appeal within 10 days, you can keep that SSI check coming while you are appealing it. There's another provision that says if you've exhausted all of your appeals and they still find that your son or daughter does not meet that adult definition of disability, if they, while in school, are covered under an IEP, which has a viable vocational goal in place, they can continue their SSI benefit despite being found to have medically improved until that plan ends. So if the plan in the IEP is to keep them in school until they're age 22, you're going to work on different job tasks and different vocational tasks so that when they pick up their diploma at age 22 or whenever it is, that they are going to be able to viably be able to use that education and that vocational help to get a job. They'll continue that check anyway. So it's very important at that age 18 medical review, if your son or daughter is under an IEP, that you point that out during the application and make sure they get a copy of that IEP, so that if for some reason your son or daughter is not approved at the adult level, you could continue the benefit under the section 301. Next slide. Past plan or plan for achieving self-support. This is not a work incentive that is going to be used often. However, for some students, it is the thing that helps them to get that leg up to get employment. It allows you to take an asset or an income that is keeping you from getting the full SSI rate, and instead set aside that asset or that income in order to purchase items or services that will have you working at a substantial level after you finish the plan. So a good example, I had a young man who was working part-time doing pizza delivery. And it was reducing his SSI. The countable income was about $300 a month. But what he really wanted to do was to be an auto mechanic. And he knew that if he took these 3 classes at the local community college for a total of like 18 months, he could then get a job. Now, this was when I was doing some work for Michigan. He could get a job at the local GM's, the GM car dealership. And then after a 2-year apprenticeship as a hey boy, which I assume means hey boy do this, hey boy do that, they would send him to Mr. Goodwrench School. So the state vocational rehabilitation in Michigan paid for him to take his tuition to take those 3 classes. And they paid the testing fee for him to do the 3 certification tests he had to take at the end of each one of those 3 classes. He took the $300 that would have normally reduced his SSI check and instead used it to buy all the tools he needed. Because even if you're working for another car shop, you need your own tools. So brake calipers and wrenches and socket, all these different things. I learned a lot during that 18 months of what kind of things you need to have in your toolbox in order to be an auto mechanic. So he used the PASS plan to set aside that $300 worth of his wages. That was the -20 minus 65 divided by 2. That was the amount that he set aside, that money, to buy those tools. He still had his full SSI check plus the other half of his wages. And he went to school. And after the 18 months, he got certified and went to work at GM. Now, I'm assuming he's a Mr. Goodwrench at this point. But some people use it for college. Some people use it maybe to start a business. And they need some startup costs or startup items for a business. Sometimes you're going to be a certified nursing assistant in a nursing home, but you need scrubs and a stethoscope and a watch with a second hand on it. So maybe it's only setting aside income from another source that would lower your SSI for a month or so to help pay for those things and not have your SSI messed up. Next. Ticket to work. A lot of people misunderstand what ticket to work stands for or what the meaning of it is. And that's why I want to focus a little bit on this. The ticket to work legislation was signed into law in December of 99. And the idea was that while the state VR in a lot of states is wonderful, it's not the be-all and end-all in some states. In some states, there's a 2-year waiting list to get VR services. So this opened up opportunities for other agencies and organizations to sign contracts with Social Security to provide services to help an individual get back to work. And in exchange, if they got them back to work, there would be some remuneration back to those organizations or agencies called employment networks Just like there's a tacit agreement with state VR that if state VR gets you back to work at a certain level, they will receive some reimbursement for some of the money that they spent getting your son or daughter back to work. It also, while you're in the middle of using that ticket to work and working with that vocational program, it stops a medical review. So I know your child is getting, they got approved at age 18, but they said, we're going to check you in 3 years and see if you've medically improved, or maybe you were in a car accident or something else. And there's expectation that, after a couple of years of rehab and PT, maybe you won't have a disability anymore, that you'll be well enough to be able to work full time again. If you were working with the ticket to work, they are not going to pull the rug out from underneath you until you complete that program. And they'll keep that check going. They won't even look to see if you've medically improved. So it's sort of the same concept of the Section 301 with VR, that's basically saying if you're working towards getting to work, we're not going to pull the rug out from underneath you and take away your cash benefit while you are pursuing that employment. However, it does not mean that you can make as much as you want while you're under ticket to work and it doesn't impact your check. Those work incentives that we've gone over, whether it be the Social Security disability side with the 9-month trial work period, and then that extended period where you have to keep it under 1550, or with the SSI minus 20 minus 65 and divide by 2. Those rules still apply. A lot of folk that assume that if they've assigned their ticket, I got this ticket to work and I'm using it with state VR, therefore I can make as much as I want while I'm still working with VR. That's not true. The ticket to work is your ticket to extra help in getting a job. It doesn't give you extra work incentives as far as how much money you can make and still draw your check. Okay. Next one. Partners in transition. We have a lot of partners, parents, teachers, vocational experts, Social Security Administration. I know a lot of you were probably grumbling when you hear me say that they're a partner in transition, but they're supposed to be. The Ticket to Work legislation implemented the job that I carried from 1990 until, or the year 2000 until I retired in 2018, which was to provide extra support in each office for individuals who needed help. Each office should have a work incentive liaison or a work incentive coordinator. Unfortunately, because so many of the offices are short-staffed right now, they may not even know who they are. But there's supposed to be one in every office and in every district. So like in Ohio, the lower half is covered by an area work incentive coordinator, and all of northern Ohio, with the exception of Toledo, is covered by a northern Ohio area work incentive coordinator. Toledo is covered by the gentleman who works in Detroit. But every office has access to that area work incentives coordinator who can help them with whether or not you're eligible for certain services. So if you have a really complex work incentive issue and the local office isn't sure what to do about it, they can always reach out to their area work incentive coordinator who can give them some guidance. Or call me. I'll tell you who to call and then you can call them to find out how to get that service. OOD, Opportunities Ohioans with Disability, or the Ohio Rehabilitation Services. They are really your friend. They will assist you. A lot of times they come into schools during the last couple of years of school to help with transition services. Sometimes they pay for a job coach. Sometimes they pay for job development. Sometimes they'll pay for a work study to see what you like or don't like, or what you have the capacity to do or not do in helping you get job placement. And they provide those services. Sometimes you need a special device. Maybe you have low vision and you need Zoom material put, magnifying material put onto your screen, or for software, or you need a special chair, or a special accommodation. They can help pay for that if it's too much for the employer by themselves to do it, to keep everybody ADA compliant. Work incentives planning and assistance groups. A lot of you will be working with your Board of Developmental Disabilities and Opportunities Ohioans with Disabilities, but know that there are other organizations out there. In Ohio, in your area, it's Legal Rights, or Ohio is, oh, I'm so sorry. Legal Aid Society of Cincinnati would handle the area for most of you. They can provide, if you're in a position where you're about ready to get a job and you have to know immediately what's going to happen if you go back to work. If you're working with OOD, they do benefit analysis that will tell you that. I'm a provider with OOD. You can always ask for me to be your provider, to provide that benefit analysis service that says this is what will happen to your Medicaid, or this is what will happen to your Medicare. And yes, you'll lose your this much of your SSI check. Nope, your SSDI check is going to be fine. You're going to lose $40 of your food stamps, or whatever it is. That's what the benefit analysis does. It gives you the opportunity to figure out on paper what will or will not happen before you get the job. I know a lot of times parents are especially concerned about their child losing the SSI cash benefit, because they're not that they're worried about the cash benefit, but they're concerned about that Medicaid benefit. And so being able to reassure them that under that 1619B rule, they're going to get to keep that Medicaid may be all they need in order to allow their son or daughter the opportunity to take on that job, knowing there'll be money ahead. They'll be working and paying into Social Security, so eventually they'll bump over to the SSDI side of the equation, where they can make more money, keep more money, but they're not going to lose their Medicaid, because a lot of times that's more important than anything else. Protection and Advocacy Group. In the state of Ohio, it's Ohio Disability Rights of Ohio. They're located in Columbus. And this would be who you would call if for some reason you feel that an employer or your state VR agency or your school is not following the Americans with Disabilities Act or Individualized Disability Education Act. This would be the group, this is the place that would advise you what to say to them. I often used them when my son was in school and I was concerned that they weren't going to provide a service that I knew that they were required to provide, and they were providing resistance because they didn't want to spend the money. And so I would call and say, okay, what are some phrases I can use? What form can I threaten them with in order to get them to do what they're supposed to do? And they can walk you through that. We've talked about the employment networks that was under the Ticket to Work slide. And Maximus is a ticket to program manager. in addition to the Social Security's toll-free number, which is 1-800-772-1213. If you go to SSA's website, socialsecurity.gov or ssa.gov, and click on Ticket to Work, it'll give you the list of employment networks, their phone numbers, how to access them by zip code, and all of the organizations and agencies in your area that would be able to provide some support services for your son or daughter as they go back to work.
Can you repeat that phone number again, Debbie?
The
The one
Social
eight.
Security's toll-free
Yeah.
number, it's 1-800-772-1213.
1213. Okay.
Okay, so now we're come to the questions. And you can take it to the last page for the thank you.
Okay.
God knows that they've had to put up with me in
Mhm.
this pitiful car as I've gotten the signal though that I think my electric is back on in the house. So that'll be a good thing when I'm finished. But now it's time to open up to questions. Any questions on Social Security, SSI, anything I can do to kind of help you out with that.
So there's no questions yet in the chat, but for those, let me see. Oh, wait, there's one more new one here. Oh, never mind. I spoke too soon. All right, so let's see. Question number one for you, Debbie, here. Is there a maximum length of months they can work if they make under the allowed amount? Can they work as long as they can?
Yes. That period is at least 36 months. That's why they call it the 36-month extended period of eligibility. During that 36 months, the check can start and stop if they're over or under. But if they're under and they're consistently under, as long as the disability continues, the check continues. That's why sometimes getting that subsidy or special condition documented, or having those impairment related work expenses documented to show that those things would bring them below is so important, because then they get to keep that full SSDI check.
There's another question out
Next.
there. But oh, did you have anything more for that question?
No.
Okay, just check. Would you please repeat the name of the agency in Columbus assimilated with the P&A group?
Protection and Advocacy, Disability Rights of Ohio, DRO. They're a wonderful group of people, and they will guide you the best they can. Just to kind of advocate for you.
If someone needs to unmute, if they don't want to type, they can unmute and ask a question, or you can just put it in the chat if there's any more, because I know this is one of those topics that leaves you thinking, and in the sense of, and if you think later, hey, I got a question, feel free, right? Debbie has her email right there. You can ask her directly, or if you don't have it, I'll be glad to forward any questions you have. If you get a lot of times, like with me, I might an hour or two later saying, oh, why didn't I ask that? So you can still feel free to reach out. But if you have any more questions, feel free to unmute or type in the chat while we have Debbie here available.
While I'm waiting for you to type in your questions, I understand that next month there's going to be a session on stable accounts. I would encourage all of you to attend, take notes. It is next best thing to sliced bread for helping you save in a safe place money for your son and daughter, so it does not impact their SSI benefit or their Medicaid, where the cap is $2,000 in assets. but allows you to save for those things that they may need in the future. It can be used for transportation, medical, durable medical equipment, education, housing, food. So you can almost figure any expense into one of those categories. It is just like the irrevocable needs-based trust that there's a Medicaid payback if they pass from anything in the stable account prior to distributing it to family members. However, it's a fabulous thing. The thing that I like a lot about it is that you can put that money in there and it's safely set aside for your child for when they need it. It takes 2 or 3 days for you to deposit money for it to hit the account, and about 2 or 3 business days if you pull money out for it to come back into their bank account. We've only pulled out money a couple times for my son, once when he was moving and had some moving expenses, so that I figure fell under housing. So we used that, but the other thing I like about it is that you can get, it looks like a credit card. It acts like a prepaid debit card. So say your son or daughter has $5,000 in their stable account. You don't want them to have access to $5,000, because if they were my son, they would just eat at Chipotle 3 times a day, every day, and use it all up. So what you do is you preload maybe $100 on there or $50 on there. My son has enough preloaded onto his stable account that it is his emergency, I need a cab home. He knows that if he has an emergency and he doesn't have enough cash for a cab, that card will buy him a cab ride home. He doesn't understand that it could also buy gas or buy Chipotle, or he could take it into a grocery store, to Target, and buy stuff. I just chose to keep his mind thinking that it's only an emergency card, but it does allow you the flexibility of giving them access to some money, and providing them with a little safety net. I mean, he has had a couple of times where the friend who was supposed to drive him home couldn't drive him home, and so he was able to take an Uber home. And being able to do that, and how that means, even if he had spent all of his cash money, was good to know. Was good to know. So I would really encourage you to pay attention to that session next month. If you
There's a few more questions here.
Okay.
Do the state and local taxes count for lowering the wage level on other disabilities than blindness?
No. It's an SSI blind work expense only, unfortunately.
The next one is it says, sorry, still a little confused on the work part of it. My son has worked for 2 years with the same company, 15 hours a week. Can he still continue to work?
Okay. I don't understand the question then, I guess.
Mm.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
I can, yes.
Okay, so my son has worked for the same company for 2 years. He
Okay.
makes $15 an hour. He works 5 hours a day for 3 days a week. So this 36-month extended period is kind of confusing me, because I don't know, can he stay there at that job? He's on SSI, but he almost has enough credits.
Okay, the 36-month period does not apply to SSI checks. It only applies to SSDI checks.
Okay, he's real close. I think he has like 19 credits and he needs 20. So when he gets switched over to He has to quit his job.
No.
I told you I was confused.
If I take 15 times 15 times 52 divided by 12, that's not over $1,550 a month.
No, it is not. He gets like
So
9.
he's fine.
He can work it.
He'll use up his 9-month trial work period probably at some point, but he's not over the 1,550. So the 36 months is at least 36 months. It could be forever. So once he switches over to SSDI, he'll just, as long as he's under whatever the SGA rate is for that year, he'll get to keep that check on forever.
So he can keep working forever and ever until he don't want to work no more, no matter like how many months it is.
As long as he's not making over the SGA rate, yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. That cleared up a lot. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Then you have another question out here. Will Social Security consider earnings generated from YouTube as self-employment?
Oh, an influencer. Wow, that's a new one. Usually if you're getting income from patrons, I think YouTube issues a 1099 miscellaneous at the end of the year if that income is over $600 in the year. So yes, it would be self-employment.
Didn't think
then
about
you
that
understand.
one.
Yeah. I have one that buys gym shoes cheap and sells them on eBay high. And that's self-employment. They have a little business flipping gym shoes. So yes, a YouTube influencer would be the same. But understand, it's not what they bring in off of that 1099. They're allowed to take their expenses off of that, but it would be self-employment. If you've not done a self-employment tax return before, I would recommend that you use a CPA or a really good software program for self-employment to walk you through what you can deduct and not deduct. So even though they might make, I mean, like my son has a podcast. I'm one of the patrons on his podcast. And I'm sure there are others. That income comes in, but he has his internet fee, he bought equipment so he could do the podcast fee expenses and all of those things that he deducts off. So it's not the gross amount that he brought in, it's what the net amount will be after his expenses. And the net amount is what you report to SSI or to SSDI.
Great question.
Yeah, it is.
Does anybody have any other questions for Debbie while we have her on? And again, if you tomorrow, next week, whatever, come across the question, feel free to email. I'll be able to forward it, or you can email her to directly using that getSSAhelp@gmail.com.
Yes. And hopefully I will have Wi-Fi. It's supposed to be back on at 8:30 tonight. And hopefully this has been a crazy day. I had just finished up doing a disability application for someone. I had just complete and printed out the application when the electricity went and the Wi-Fi went.
Ooh.
So thank goodness I got it in before all of that went away. But I haven't been able to do anything on my computer with work since. But I will be in the office all day tomorrow. And so if you have a question, feel free to give me an email and I can respond. I know sometimes it's really hard. You got to think about it for a while. And everybody's situation is different. And I also respect the idea that even typing it into a chat box. There's other people seeing you type it in, and you might feel that this is something personal. I know when we were doing these face to face in Butler County, how many times was I out in the parking lot still at 10:30 at night, Patty,
Yeah.
answering questions, because I wouldn't leave till everybody's question was answered. But I understood that there were people who didn't want to ask their question in front of everybody else because it pertained to them. And I get that. As a mom of 2 kids with disabilities, I get it. You know, this is complicated and it's private, and anything I can do to help facilitate you moving forward with your son and daughter, I'm more than glad to do.
Debi's a great resource when I was trying to fill out different forms, or if I get, and this is something else you would see with Social Security, is get a work activity packet or something, if, whatever they're, touching base with you or whatever. I was quick to message her and say, what is this? And she would answer and tell me what to do. So, I mean, she's a great resource to have. If you have a quick question or a general question about the processes, or, as you're going through. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close the recording. So if anybody wants to unmute and speak, I want to make sure everybody has that opportunity. I want to thank before I close the recording, and just thank Debi for using the circumstance of losing her electric and everything, but still being able to jump on by phone, thank goodness, tonight. And I just want to thank all those who have listened and have attended. We will be, just as a quick announcement, next month we're looking at guardianship, supported decision-making, special needs trust, and stable account. So we go right into those topics next month. They all kind of flow together, so I kind of keep them together because they all kind of overlap in some way with each other. So, but thank you, Debi, and thank you for coming. I'm just going to go ahead and shut the recording down, and then whoever wants to ask a question can still ask. So 1 second.